Back when film was first starting to become a regular part of the entertainment world, your only option to experience it was to go to a theater. After the time was up for its exhibition, that was it. Maybe you could get lucky and see it rerun somewhere, but if you really enjoyed what you saw or couldn't make it to a theater in time, you were out of luck. Even worse, a lot of early films got lost to fires, film reels deteriorating, or even studios outright destroying them to make storage space. It wasn't until said studios saw the money in home media distribution that we started to see better efforts in film preservation. With televisions becoming commonplace in the average household, movies soon made their way to the living room via broadcast. From there, we eventually saw the introduction of devices that brought a revolution to the home media experience. In the 70s, some of the first consumer-friendly video formats emerged: Betamax, Laserdisc, and VHS. A prominent rental market took shape, allowing audiences another avenue of experiencing film after its opening weekend. But what about those who wanted their own personal library? For them, the only option for a while was either to pay the price rental shops had to pay distributors, which was very high, or wait until way after release to pick up a copy. Things were centered on renting until retail VHS prices lowered around the 80s. Now, movies and television occupied the same shelf space as records, CDs, and books in homes. Things were just getting started. VHS was the king of home media distribution, but that crown soon went to another as the mid-90s rolled around. The digital versatile disc, or as we know it, the DVD. With its focus on intuitive menus, options for subtitles and audio tracks, and special features, the world of physical media was forever changed. Fast forward, and that brings us to today. Streaming has more or less become the norm for how we experience film and television. More and more people have dropped cable in favor of it, and might even wait for films to drop digitally instead of in theaters. Some movies even drop the same day as theaters and/or exclusively on these services. We have a new level of access to media than before, on paper. In recent times, public perception has turned against streaming due to a myriad of issues that have started to get worse and worse. What started as the future of entertainment became an active deterrent to it. Between media constantly moving or getting removed, increasing prices, and all sorts of other stuff, it started to be more of an inconvenience. Naturally, with all this talk of how this era of the entertainment industry has continued to devalue artistic preservation and inch towards stripping us of agency in the name of so-called convenience, I've also seen talk about physical media. Some encouraging others to take the opportunity to buy copies of things they love, and others acting as if it just isn't a thing anymore. The latter is so far from the truth. DVDs and Blu-rays are still made and still have a niche yet dedicated community of collectors. They make less money than they used to, but it's still enough to warrant new titles dropping every single week. It's still an entirely valid, often better, option compared to streaming for things you really care about, without having to worry about it being inaccessible down the line. Today, I want to take the time to talk at length about what's become one of my favorite hobbies, collecting movies and TV shows on discs. I've always been into physical media in some fashion since I was a kid, but it wasn't until about a couple years ago where I got really into it. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned now, but I've always been a strong advocate for people getting to own the things they care about. In a day and age where that freedom is being slowly eroded, it's something I don't think we should take for granted. While I don't want to jinx it, there's always a possibility of there being a future without physical media. Instead of forfeiting ourselves to that, I want to show that it's still a viable option for those who don't know it's still open to them. So without further ado, I want to dive right into why I still bother with disc at all. And how/why you should too. You might have a lot of questions and concerns about collecting, now that a lot of people have flocked to streaming. Whenever the conversation comes up about the relevance of buying physical, I see the same few talking points over and over, and/or people that straight up don't know what they're talking about. Things like whether or not your disc would just die out on you, or what the heck a Blu-ray even is. I want to do a bit of a quick overview on how you yourself could get into collecting and what to consider when doing so. Please keep in mind that this will be primarily from a US-centric lens, given that that's where I live and naturally have expertise in. With that all out of the way, let's just get right into things. Why even bother? I can just stream everything, or just buy it digital. This is the most common argument against physical media that I've had to hear for years now. When I've told some people that I collect, I get met with the response of, that's just on Netflix. But it's never that simple, especially now. I'll go into a bit more detail on a few of the key reasons why I personally have gotten tired of streaming to an extent, and have gone out of my way to have a dedicated physical library still. Movies and TV shows move from service to service on a whim. This is something I alluded to in the intro, but it's become more and more of an annoyance trying to track down what service a movie is on. I started to really take notice when I was originally watching Sergeant Frog on Netflix, and one day I was taken out with no warning. That's what led me to buy the DVDs. One moment you think, oh, this is on Netflix, I can just watch it on there down the line, and the next it's on some random news service that's popped up like Peacock or Paramount Plus. It's too much to all keep up with, and just having a disc is so much simpler and straightforward now. It brings me much more peace of mind to know something I want to watch is always accessible to me. A lot of stuff is just straight up not available for one reason or another. As someone who watches a lot of stuff from outside of America, trying to find legal avenues to experience what other countries have to offer is often more of a hassle than not. Anime I can get pretty lucky with, but in my experience, anything that doesn't have a strong international following just isn't picked up by a lot of services. Even more domestic films are occasionally a pain in the ass to find. Right now, I can't catch up and watch the original 28 Days Later before that new sequel comes out. If it's like that for a relatively well-known and well-liked film, you can imagine what it's like for things more obscure that companies have less financial incentive to keep track of. Digital ownership is not truly ownership. So buying a show or movie through sites like Vudu, Movies Anywhere, or iTunes is also an option. But there's been a lot of instances that show that, in reality, you don't truly own that media even if you bought it on one of those storefronts. They can be removed from your library for any reason at all, whether it's some licensing debacle with the distributor, or the company behind it deciding to do a tax write-off. It happens all the time with video games, and the same is true with movies and TV. But unlike with video games, even things you did buy before removal can be made inaccessible. Unless these companies start hiring ninjas to take the shit off my shelf, my discs aren't going anywhere. The quality of a disc almost unanimously eclipses that of streaming. With playing media off a disc, there's the obvious advantage of not having to worry about buffering, variable connection speeds / bandwidth, compression, and so on. But even when a stream is going as good as it can, a disc quality eclipses it. Blu-rays in particular play at a very high bitrate on average, meaning more consistent, crisper video and audio. Both internet service providers and streamers themselves often throttle bit rates in order to not expend too much bandwidth. It's something that's hard to really show, especially in a YouTube video subject to its own compression, but Blu-rays just feel so much better to watch things on. I remember one time playing Kung Fu Panda at a party and hearing a friend say, "This movie's never looked so good." That Blu-ray transfer is from 2008 and still holds its own over a modern internet stream. Streaming is getting worse and worse while slowly costing more and more. In addition to all the reasons I already listed, streaming across the board has started to become more costly every year. Feels like every few months I see Netflix, Amazon, Disney, and the like announce that they're increasing their prices. In exchange, they're getting more restrictive on password sharing and introducing ads for the more affordable tiers of subscriptions. Literally, one of the big things that was so appealing about streaming when it was first starting was not having to worry about ads, unlike broadcast television. Not to mention, again, the amount of stuff that's being purged now, building uncertainty of whether things will always remain on service. What sense does it make to keep funneling more and more of my hard-earned money into services that are just getting more annoying to use? No paid service should make me have to sit through the same few ads during a movie or show. That's not to say I've sworn off streaming altogether. I've got subscriptions to Criterion Channel and HBO Max. I refuse to just call it Max, because they've got some of the best selection. And the former has monthly themed collections that keep me invested. It's also nice to be able to just sit back and watch stuff on my tablet or computer sometimes. But other than those, I don't intend to spend so much on a bunch of services full of things I probably won't all watch. Just seems like a reinvention of the problem of cable, except now creators are paid less due to them not having to give residuals for them. I don't have the space for a whole collection. That's entirely fine. You don't need to have every single movie and show under the sun. Personally speaking, I'm a big film buff, so I tend to pick up whatever I like that I've watched, in addition to things I haven't watched that look up my alley. But I know that's not for everyone, especially when you consider space and money. At the end of the day, if you want to get into collecting, Your focus should be on what satisfies you. A small shelf full of your absolute favorite films and or TV shows is just fine to have. You can even take it a step further and collect as many variations of one film as you can. There's no rule that says you can't have the biggest collection of click. Don't give in to FOMO over not having a big library. Plus, as we'll get into later, you can always back up any disc digitally for safekeeping. There's some nifty solutions for if you're low on space and still want to collect. When I was in college, I was pretty well known for storing most of my collection in a trunk under my bed and running to my dorm to grab something from it when we wanted to have a group movie night. You can find other sorts of containers at Target and such, which can fit under a bed. There's also these transparent containers I found on Amazon which can help make your collection more portable too. If you want to forego cases altogether, you can invest in one of these disc binder things. Super slim cases are another solution if you still want that box art. I don't have a player. How do I play my discs? So, seeing how most modern laptop manufacturers no longer have disk drives built in, and a lot of the general public threw out their old DVD players, it stands to reason that you may not even have one to begin with anymore. But thankfully, there's several options out there no matter what kind of setup you have. One option that you might already own are game consoles. The PS2 and original Xbox were some of the first big consoles to be able to play DVDs out of the box. Personally speaking, the PS2 was my first DVD player I owned, and I got a lot of use out of it. The controller works pretty well for menuing, but there's also a remote you could get that functions more like a traditional one. Speaking of remotes, the original Xbox can't play DVDs without one for some reason. So if you have one of those laying around somewhere that you want to use, keep that in mind. However, depending on your TV, you might not even be able to hook up those 6th gen consoles up to your display. HDMI is pretty much the standard at this point, which these next systems do support. Following that generation, we got the PS3, which had a built-in Blu-ray drive. I'll get into a bit more detail on the difference between Blu-ray and DVD later. Just know that a Blu-ray player is required to play Blu-ray disc, and you can play DVDs on a Blu-ray player. Xbox 360, on the other hand, still kept the DVDs, and the short-lived HD DVD format via an add-on. From there, we got the PS4 and Xbox One, which both play Blu-ray natively. Then naturally, there's the PS5 and Xbox Series X, which also play Blu-rays, and now 4K Ultra HD Blu-rays. Of course, you need the models that have the disc drives in order to do so. Moving on from consoles, we have standalone players. I am admittedly a little less familiar with these since I just use my PlayStations these days. The major difference with these is that you'll be able to use Dolby Vision HDR on 4K discs that have it, unlike on consoles which have it disabled. There's a lot of different brands, and I'm not exactly knowledgeable enough to get into each specific one. If you're wanting to get into VHS as well, there's plenty of DVD and VHS combo devices out there to use. More modern players also have internet connectivity for if you want to do streaming on them, which can be nifty. Something to keep in mind with all players is region coding. DVDs and Blu-rays are assigned specific regions and can only be played on these specific regions' players. For example, I live in America, so almost my entire collection is in Region A. Every player I own only plays Region A, and if I put in a disc from another region, it won't play. It's really annoying, but if you have interest in releases of a different region code, you could always invest in a region-free player from sites like 220 Electronics, or mod an older game system such as the PS3 to open your options even further. Some discs, including all 4Ks, are also region-free, which means they play on any player. I'd double check online before you buy something to be completely sure you can play it on your region's player or not. Finally, the more economical and potentially useful option is a disk drive for your computer. There's external ones you can just plug in via USB, which are perfect for if you have a laptop, or internal ones you can install into a desktop. Just make sure your case has a drive bay for it. I'd suggest downloading VLC Player to watch DVDs, since it supports playback natively and works pretty well with no extra steps. Playing Blu-rays is where things might get tricky, as Windows doesn't natively support Blu-ray playback with its own player. VLC can play them, but it requires a bit of work first. Blu-rays are encrypted, which prevents them from being played normally. The program Make MKV can circumvent this, but at that point you're probably better off using it to rip the disc and playing them that way. Where should I buy from? Like with players, there's a lot of options depending on where you live and what you're into. Now, I don't think it's much of a surprise to see that big brick-and-mortar store chains have slowly phased out physical media on their shelves. In the time it's taken for me to actually finish writing this, Best Buy announced they're straight up no longer selling physical movies and shows both in-store and online in 2024. But it's not the end of the world. There's still some places you can walk into for new discs. This will vary on where you live. Some specific locations have phased out their physical media sections entirely, but others still have them up. The Targets near where I live still keep mostly newer movies stocked, and Walmart has apparently stepped up kinda decently in the game in some areas. The one closest to my house kinda sucks, but 10 minutes out and there's one by me that has probably the best selection I've seen in a modern brick and mortar store as of late. You can always find complete series DVD sets in their electronics section, which is great if you want to collect TV shows. Along with that, they've taken up the mantle when it comes to steelbooks after Best Buy's exit. I got lucky and got their last copies of Dune Part 1 and Fury Road recently. On top of all that, their bargain bins can be pretty good if you're looking to save. I still have my copies of Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 and Alien, which I got from those for about $8 a piece. Barnes & Noble, if you're lucky enough to live by one that hasn't fully gutted their selection, can also be a pretty decent place to shop. Though you're better off waiting for sales due to them selling at MSRP, which is really, really overpriced. Thrift stores, pawn shops, secondhand stores, and flea markets can be a great resource for both players and disc. Goodwills and the like almost always have DVD players and even Blu-ray players each time I go for stupid cheap prices. Since a lot of the general public have gotten on the streaming train, I found that there's more and more recent stuff that I can find used, and still in pretty good condition at these places. Sometimes I even find movies with their digital codes unused and still redeemable. Half-price books tends to be one of the best in that regard, especially given that they keep discs behind the counter so they don't get stolen like at Goodwills. You never know what you'll find while out and about, so I highly suggest looking into what kind of stores or markets there are wherever you live. These places are effectively overflowing with physical media to buy, so it's always worth a shot. If something I want has been out for a while and or is out of print, I recommend checking for a good used copy before anywhere else. For newer or more niche things, your best bet is shopping online. Amazon is the obvious and biggest choice, but you can do so much better than them. While they can have some pretty good prices, they're also notoriously 50-50 when it comes to whether or not packages end up damaged by them. I've had plenty of times that I got things in mint condition with no issue, but a good number of times I've also had to replace cases for my Blu-rays because they insist on shipping in these flimsy bubble mailers that do nothing to protect from damage. Thankfully, they're pretty liberal when it comes to handing out refunds and replacements, but I'd rather not have to worry about that all the time when buying. Still, free shipping is a nice plus, so I haven't 100% sworn off of them. eBay is your next best bet, as more often than not, the sellers on there package physical media with actual care. Also, you're more likely to find some older, harder to find releases that Amazon and other major stores don't stock. Just make sure to check the reviews of said sellers, and the listing that you're looking at has some pictures to verify what you're getting, and it's smooth sailing from there. There have been some cases of people selling bootlegs, so I try to stay vigilant when browsing. For example, the Funimation Full Metal Alchemist Blu-ray is out of print, and there's cheap Blu-rays that have circulated which look new, but are actually fakes. Quite a few physical media focused websites also exist that are worth a look, such as Deep Discount, Orbit DVD, Diabolic DVD, and Groove. Orbit in particular I recommend both because it's a cool local business and because they've got a lot of releases from other regions that you can't easily get at big retailers. Groove, on the other hand, has popped up recently and always has some sales going on, along with shipping out pre-orders early. I've seen mixed reception on their packaging like with Amazon, but personally I haven't had any issue with them this few times I had shopped. Then there's sites that sell specific boutique labels on catalog of titles. Criterion Collection, Shout Factory, Kino Lorber, Arrow Video, and the like. It's always great to support those companies more directly to help out what they do. I'll get more into some of them later, but just know that a lot of them do sales year-round, which can be both incredibly handy and incredibly addicting. I've gotten more modest in my collecting as of late, but those Criterion half-off sales always have me in a chokehold. How should I keep track of my collection? If you're like me, you have a long list of stuff you own that is only getting bigger. There's a few good methods for keeping track of and showing off what you own. The first one that I started out with was a simple Google Docs list. Sheets or Microsoft Excel is probably more practical to use and more organized, but I was like 17 or 18 when I made this inventory, and it's what worked for me. I like to highlight things such as if a release is a TV show or a boutique release to help better organize my shelves. Everyone has their own little system that works for them. Sometimes I see people organize their catalog by director, genre, and sometimes even by color. The possibilities are endless. Second is Letterboxd. Along with being a pretty good place to track movies you watch, it's also a great place to track what you own and have it on display for others to see. Making a list on there is pretty simple, and it's also nifty since you can set the list to organize alphabetically every time you open, so you don't have to manually shift where things are each time you add something. There's apparently other options if you're a subscriber on there for marking what you own, but I'm just on the freebie shit. Only thing is, you won't be able to add TV shows you own onto the list outside of the few outliers that are on the platform for whatever reason. Though I guess they plan to add TV down the line anyway, but for now it's mostly movies. Last is Blu-ray.com. I mentioned them earlier, but they have a very useful collections feature where you can keep track of what specific versions of a disc you own and get some neat stats from your collection. There's an app version called My Movies, which allows you to scan barcodes to add to your digital catalog with ease. I just stay clear of the comments, forums, and some of the reviews for that matter sometimes. If you want a good laugh, I suggest looking up their review for the Criterion release of Pink Flamingos on there. Trust me. What the heck even is a Blu-ray? Despite being introduced all the way back in 2006, I think the general public still doesn't fully know what a Blu-ray is. DVDs still sell way more than Blu-ray to this day, likely due to just how widespread the former is and the time that the latter debuted. By then, I can imagine a lot of people thought it was just some scam to make people throw out all their DVDs when they already had gone through this trouble of upgrading from VHS. Of course, following that, streaming became mainstream. I don't necessarily blame people for being misinformed. When you saw ads back in the day for the format, probably on your DVDs before watching a film, it didn't truly capture the difference. But once you see, it's as clear as night and day. Blu-ray is basically another disc format, except this time it plays at 1080p as opposed to the 480p that DVD offers. This immediately makes a lot of difference due to the leap from standard definition to high definition video. Now, at first it might not really matter because DVDs are by and large still pretty watchable. This isn't a diss towards anyone who still chooses to buy DVDs, whether it be for budgetary reasons or just not having equipment or whatever. At the end of the day, you do you. But I just want to discuss the differences for those who may not be aware. I've had people in recent days tell me they had no idea all this time that Blu-ray was in full HD until I told them. So I think it's still valuable info to provide, even if it may seem obvious to the average collector. Now that being said, I'm no videophile, so I'm not exactly at liberty to go into the fullest of detail on the intricacies of video quality, but I'll try to simplify it best as I can. With even more pixels to work with at 1080p, that means more color depth. If you've seen a movie in a Dolby theater, you might have seen them bragging about how black in the projected image is, for example. This applies for all colors, which really pop in 1080 compared to 480. There's finer nuance to how color is displayed, especially with gradients. If you watch stuff that's compressed, you might have noticed what's called banding, where the transitions between tones of color have a clear line instead of gradually changing like they should. Detail is another thing you can see an uptick in, with more parts of the image being able to be seen in full clarity. The difference is much more apparent when watching on a big display, which makes deficits in image quality stand out even more. There's also 4K Blu-rays for those who want the highest visual quality they can get on disc. It may be hard to tell the difference immediately from regular 1080p Blu-rays, but I think the best way to put it is that with a well-made transfer, they are the closest you can get to seeing a movie just like it was in theaters. The colors and detail levels can really make a difference. I just suggest doing a bit of research if you're looking into 4Ks of older films, especially, because sometimes studios half-ass it via excessive DNR or digital noise reduction, or now even using gross-looking AI upscales. That recent True Lies remaster is a great example of what can go wrong when filmmakers get too obsessed with retrofitting old films to look as smooth and modern as possible. Though for some, all this is just nitpicking, and a DVD does the job just fine. How home media changes up the visual identity of a work is a whole other subject on its own. Noodle and Niche Caesar have some interesting videos on it that I suggest checking out. Regardless of which kind of Blu-ray player you get, you can still play all of your DVDs on them. Again, may seem like a no-brainer for a lot of the fellow collectors in the audience, but I have had people who aren't nerds about this stuff, like me, say they had no idea Blu-ray players had backwards compatibility until I told them. No need to worry about having to upgrade all of them, unless you want to like I did, or being unable to watch stuff that's only on DVD. At the end of the day, collect what you want to collect that works best for you. There's people out there who still shop for old VHS tapes, and even Laserdisc. Likewise, there's plenty of people who still collect DVDs and are perfectly happy with that, Whether it's due to cost, wanting a specific cut of a movie, special features, something not being available on Blu-ray, or not having a new player yet. At the end of the day, the hobby is about holding a piece of media you love in your hand, and it doesn't matter the format. I've seen a fair share of elitism in the community against people who still buy DVDs or other so-called outdated formats, and that shouldn't be what we do when someone just wants to share what they bought that they're excited about. That's the last thing I want to promote with this video. I want to inform, and not judge how folks engage with this hobby. Aren't discs able to rot or deteriorate? So I see this talking point always come up every few months when people want to be all doom and gloom and fearmonger about physical media being dead. Discs are still bound to physics at the end of the day, and can be susceptible to wear and tear. But there's a few ways to both significantly lessen that risk and get around that entirely. Bronzing or rot is something I've observed only being a widespread issue in specific instances when manufacturers mess up. You can see it as warping on the reflective side of a disc or a bunch of dots popping up on there. It really comes down to the environment in which you store your discs and properly caring for them. The common thing I hear is that non-rewritable discs have an approximate shelf life of about 5 to 10 plus years. Speaking as someone who owns a lot of stuff that I bought both old and new, along with still holding onto some discs from my childhood, I find the claim ridiculous. I've heard of and seen DVDs that still work well after they're predicted to die. One of my childhood DVDs, the Powerpuff Girls movie, which was originally pressed in 2002, still works on my PS5 to this day. The thing's more than 20 years old and has shown no signs of dying on me yet, despite having numerous scratches. Same can be said for several other DVDs I own, used or not. If you take good care of your collection, you'll be able to keep watching it for years and years to come. If anything is really going to cause serious deterioration over time, it's a disc getting scratched, which is both fixable via disc servicing machines and preventable by just taking actual good care of what you bought, and storing them in humidity/heat, a la putting them in the basement prone to flooding or poor insulation. Of course, sometimes things can still go awry for whatever reason. The only times I've personally had issues with discs skipping or not playing these days are used discs that were clearly not taken care of and ones that were defective out of the box. For example, my copy of Monsoon Wedding from Criterion that I got on sale had to be replaced due to a manufacturing issue that a few of the releases were subject to around 2010. That's been my only disc that's actually rotted. Another time, my original copy of Crimson Peak that I got from Half Price Books started skipping around the middle when watching with friends. Both instances are super few and far between for me. Maybe I'm just lucky and haven't had to deal with deterioration that much. I personally encounter more posts in the collector subreddits I sometimes browse, with people paranoid about their disc possibly having rot or some defect that obviously don't have it, than actual instances of deterioration. Not to say it doesn't happen at all, just that it's not some big scary thing where your copy of The Cruise 2 will work one day and crap out the other. Your discs aren't time bombs. In a world where media giants are slowly taking away our agency in how we experience art, the last thing I want to do is scare people away from owning what they love. All that being said, if you're still concerned about the condition and quality of your discs going down the road, or just want a bit more ease for viewing them, I'd advise ripping and backing them up digitally with a disk drive on your computer, like I mentioned earlier. Handbrake is a program you can use to rip DVDs, and Make MKV for Blu-rays. You can find some hard drives and throw them on there for safekeeping. From there, you can set up your own Plex or Jellyfin servers to stream your collection at home or even at other places with Wi-Fi, like your own personal streaming service. It can be costly, especially if you own a lot, but if you're already investing a lot into a collection, I don't think it's too out of the question to make the effort to archive. This certain show/movie I want doesn't have a physical release. Now, this is a tough one, because most of these big companies that release things exclusively for the streaming platforms want them to stay on those platforms. Getting as many subscribers as possible is their priority. Hell, a lot of broadcast television shows, even pre-streaming, don't even have them. But it doesn't hurt to just double check if something has a disc release before having to resort to other methods. For example, a number of Netflix and Amazon Prime's movies have continually been getting the physical treatment from Criterion, and occasionally shows like Harley Quinn and The Haunting of Hill House get DVDs and Blu-ray sets. Recently, even some Disney Plus shows have been getting steelbooks, which I completely didn't expect. I'd suggest always keeping an eye on sites like Blu-ray.com as a quick reference of whether or not something has or is getting a release, along with following accounts such as Disconnected, and download a disc on Twitter/Instagram that are always up to date on what's coming soon. Some companies have had some nice surprises lately in terms of what they'll remaster/re-release. Sony, for example, have thrown some real curveballs, such as the recent steelbooks of Paprika, Amelie, and The Raid. Never say never, because what you may want could be around the corner. Of course, there's also nothing stopping you from either making your own bootleg disc or buying one online because a company refuses to make their work more accessible. Last time I went to the flea market, there was even a stall selling said bootlegs for shows such as The Mandalorian and Andor. Goes to show there's still a market for owning media. I still don't want to go out of my way to buy stuff. Well, that's entirely fine too. Collecting physical media just might not be your thing, or something you can do for whatever reason. Space and budget are probably the two big factors for many. Renting from libraries is still an option, and there's always other avenues outside of the official ones. If push comes to shove and what you're trying to watch is inaccessible to you, I think it's more than fine to access it through other means. I'm not here to judge you if you do, especially in a time that we're in where movies and shows can be erased from public access at a moment's notice. With all that out of the way, I want to get more into what has made the hobby of collecting movies and shows so fruitful for me, and why there's still such a strong community going for it. This will be a bit more personally tied to my own experience and expertise, so don't expect everything to be covered, but I hope through sharing some of my love for this hobby, that you'll at least see why it's still so worthwhile in my eyes. As mentioned before, my first big DVD player that I had to myself was the PS2. The convenience of watching a movie or show right on the console I play games on is commonplace today, but in the 2000s it was something so novel. Sony opting to have this be built into the system was one of the reasons DVD caught on so heavily in that era. Naturally, I made a habit out of getting a copy of any movie I saw on whenever it got a DVD release. It was something I would anticipate heavily, waiting for commercials for them to pop up while watching Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon. Most of my old DVDs I've since upgraded to Blu-ray or donated, but I still have a few left over. Speaking of Blu-ray, I will get into that around 2013 when I got my PS4 for my birthday. I didn't have a PS3 until I nabbed a used one in high school, so I was late to the high-def disc party, but it was better late than never. Things were kind of the same in terms of my collecting after then. I'd pick up a movie here or there, or if I liked it, but it wasn't something I was as committed to. But things started to ramp up around 2018 to 19. I got my first job working at a movie theater, which meant I got to watch a lot more movies than before for free. Coupled with said theater being right by a Target I could walk to that had Blu-rays, and I got a lot more into the hobby than before. By the time I was gearing towards moving into dorms for college, I had gathered enough that necessitated making an inventory list to keep track of it all. This was only the beginning of what would be such a big undertaking for me. Believe it or not, there was a time I could fit my entire collection in this big tub container. Not a perfect storage solution, but it got the job done for when I stayed there. Each of the floors of the dorms had Blu-ray players on them, and that made movie nights something we did almost every other night amongst my friends. One of my first big memories of a lot of people I'd grown close with in college was orientation night, where a bunch of us gathered to watch Spirited Away. It was before they installed the Blu-ray players, so I remember fiddling around for almost an hour trying to get the movie to work, only to find out I was putting a Blu-ray and a DVD player the entire time. After that, it was a great night with everyone huddled around the TV while drawing or just getting sucked into the film. This really validated my love for collecting between the camaraderie of sharing movies in such a tactile way and the convenience that it gave over having to rely on the dodgy dorm Wi-Fi. My collecting picked up some more, as it gave more options for stuff to watch along with me just getting a lot more into film in general because of classes. Human Netflix is a nickname I remember picking up. I think one of my favorite memories had to have been watching Parasite for the first time as a group, where none of us knew anything going in. Such a great time, preceding when we all had to move back home to a certain historical event I don't think I had to name. Being stuck inside forced me to really try and keep myself entertained. There was maybe a whole month where I binged through the entirety of King of the Hill. It was an interesting time to say the least. Since I had all this time on my hands now, I figured I'd say screw it and buy some movies I had been meaning to for a while. Since I couldn't go outside, I made a few orders at Blu-ray hauls throughout the months. What started as a little selection of occasional buys soon ballooned into a full-on library. By the time I had moved into my apartment for my next semester, I had enough to more than halfway fill up the first shelf I had bought for myself. It only took about a couple months after to get it just about filled. Then, when I moved to another place, I had to get another shelf, and now I'm on my way towards needing another shelf. Having something to hold and appreciate on your shelf is a big part of the appeal to me, which you can't get when you just stream stuff. There's just something about picking something out with your hands that makes things more personal. Preferably the box art is a good representation of the film or show that allows it to stand out on a shelf. Double if the disc itself has something going on besides just slapping a logo on a blue background and calling it a day. It's a bit of a contentious subject for collectors, but I personally tend to love getting a slipcover. Some of them have embossed elements, have some sort of special material that makes them literally shine and just make the case stand out even more. One step beyond that are steelbooks, which I own a good number of. These always have artwork unique from the standard release, where the design takes priority over having to have a bunch of fluff like review quotes and such take up space. An even bigger step beyond are box sets. That's where you'll see designers really go all out on making a release special, or throwing in other physical goodies like whole books. The possibilities for creative package design are endless, and it's always fun to see what is crafted next. And in 2024, I've officially gotten to more than 1,000 releases that I own on Blu-ray, which gives me a lot to choose from. I like to think of it as my own personal video store or library that I can always rely on to select from when I'm wanting to watch something different. Occasionally, I'll just walk up and pull things off the shelf just to look at them, and reminisce about the film and memories surrounding it. A thing I started doing for about a year or so now is putting my ticket stubs that I got from seeing a movie in theaters in the cases. It adds even more of a personal element to my collecting. A big thing I see just about everyone who grew up with DVDs get nostalgic over are the special features. With the storage space that DVDs had over VHS, we saw an explosion in the potential of enhancing the home media experience. Not only could you rewatch your favorite movie or show, but now you could get insight into what went into it. You get commentary tracks, documentaries, interviews, and even sometimes more interactive elements. It's a great way to get insight into the creative process of whatever you watch. The menus themselves used to be an art all on their own that had effort put into them as well. People went out of their way to record new material for a part of the disc that people might just skip past to get right to the film. It is exceptionally rare to see special features and behind-the-scenes featurettes on streaming, but they never fully went away on physical formats. Sure, if you still use DVDs, it may seem like they just stopped producing supplements for home media, but around the 2010s, extras for newer movies started to get relegated almost entirely to Blu-rays. It's something I observed on combo packs I own, which come with Blu-ray and DVD, where most of the features are listed as Blu-ray only. Let's look at a recent favorite of mine, for example, The Batman. Check the back of the DVD release, and it's just a film and a featurette that lasts about 6 minutes. Pretty slim pickings there. Now, let's look at the Blu-ray. Both the regular Blu-ray and 4K UHD release come with an extra disc entirely dedicated to special features. Almost 2 hours worth of bonus material on top of the movie. Granted, this is a bit of an outlier, as a lot of major studios just have at the very least a commentary track and a handful of featurettes, or even ship the disc with just a film and nothing else. But again, it's more common than not nowadays. You'll get at least a little something in addition to the movie or show you want to own. I'll take that over the almost complete lack of supplements on streaming. Sure, Disney Plus and some other services may have some extras here and there, but they sure as hell don't have that clutch cargo parody from the home media version of The Incredibles. That being said, I do research into what version of a set you get, because sometimes features are omitted when upgrades happen. Such as the 4K of Lord of the Rings, which straight up just doesn't have any of the extensive supplements that have been available since the DVDs. Sometimes you get lucky and legacy material is brought over to new formats. Other times, it's unfortunately an afterthought. When it comes to watching the media itself, there's just something about loading up a disc which makes it more special than digital. Maybe it's having to pick a thing off a shelf, or to build up to starting something as you put it into the player. It's especially more fun when with another person or group. Kind of like playing a multiplayer game on a couch with others over online. It's me sitting down with my copy of this movie or show and experiencing it. Plus, like I mentioned before, it just almost always looks better than a stream. Call me archaic or backwards, but there's something to the inconvenience which I find more novel than the easiest option sometimes. Above all else, I think I have gotten such a strong interest in collecting and building my own library because it's deepened my love for film. While it's not everyone's cup of tea, I often like to buy copies of movies I've never seen before to give them a shot. A blind buy can be a gamble, especially if you factor in money, but I don't see as much different than spending a night at the theater with a film you haven't watched prior. Except, in this case, if I don't like the movie, I can just sell it, donate it, or just give it away to give someone else a gift of something they might get something out of. In a time where it feels like we're being pigeonholed into relying on algorithms to decide what to watch, I get much more of a kick out of being my own curator. especially considering how much is excluded from streaming, whether it be because it's just too old or too obscure or whatever. It's something of a valuable skill that's kept movie watching a fun experience for me. What's made this curation a lot easier is the amount of boutique companies out there that give a lot of love to cinema, outside of just what's the most popular. I'll walk through just a few, though there's plenty more out there, especially outside of America. The most well-known in the game that I also own the most of is the Criterion Collection. I've been a fan since I picked up their Blu-ray of Fantastic Mr. Fox back in 2018, and it was my gateway drug into the boutique world. From the onset, I wanted to pick it up because I loved the movie and saw a version of it with a fancier cover than the standard release. When I actually got my hands on it, it blew me away with the attention to detail and packaging and how it had a whole booklet full with writing on the film alongside behind-the-scenes pictures. That's when I discovered how much packaging could be an art all its own. Some of their releases come in creatively designed digipacks, especially their box sets, but a lot of them tend to come in these clear cases that let the box art shine and truly represent the films they're from. It's no wonder they can be addicting to collect of how nice they look lined up next to each other. That's all before even getting into the contents of the discs themselves. Criterion set the gold standard for what a special edition should look like, with just how extensive they get with their supplemental material. The first home video commentary track was from their Laserdisc of King Kong back in 1984. Alongside the booklet I mentioned before, each disc of theirs tends to be loaded with all sorts of goodies that help contextualize the film and deepen appreciation of the art form. My favorite thing is when they decide to throw in an entire extra film on top of the base film included on the disc, for no extra cost. For example, Exotica comes with another one of Adam Egoyan's films, Calendar. Can't argue with getting 2 films for the price of 1. There's more than 1,200 films in the collection across a variety of genres and from all sorts of different countries. You're bound to find something worthwhile in there, whether it be something more obscure or an established classic. If you're wanting to dive further into film, they're a great place to start. The Criterion Closet videos, where actors, filmmakers, and other notable figures give recommendations, serve as an actually jumping off point for the uninitiated. Now, while Criterion's selection is often great and encompasses a lot, they don't get everything. Licensing rights are complicated, and a company can only cover so many niches. There's a whole swath of others who have you covered when it comes to specific genres. If you're looking for cult classics, Arrow Video has you covered plenty. A lot of their releases are horror, but they also have a lot of sci-fi, martial arts, exploitation films, and more. My first purchase from them was their edition of Donnie Darko, and from there I've been pretty happy with everything else I've gotten from them. I'm especially a big fan of them branching out into martial arts films more, along with nice surprises like their edition of David Lynch's Dune, which I plan to pick up down the line. In recent years, they've been pretty playful with their selection, so I'm always looking forward to what they have to offer. They have month-long sales at Barnes & Noble just like Criterion, along with sales on their site, so there's always some opportunity to score something from them all year. A company that's also got some good range worth mentioning is Shout Factory. They're probably the most well known for the sub-level Scream Factory, which releases both classic and contemporary horror films in snazzy collector's editions. They got a lot more than horror, as they have branched out to action films, dramas, comedies, animation, and so on. Their catalog is always expanding, so I'd suggest giving them a look if you're wanting some even more cult or niche works in your collection. Another great place to look for a variety of classic, contemporary, and international film is Kino Lorber. They haul absolute ass serving up loads of new releases from all across film history. I feel like every other week I'm hearing of a new slate of announcements from them, with so many nice surprises such as them picking up the distribution rights to Bottoms. Like Shout Factory, they've got a few sub-labels, ranging from their Studio Classics line, which covers Hollywood films, to Milestone, which focuses on underrepresented cinema outside the mainstream. I'm not as familiar with their catalog, but they're another cool destination for those wanting to expand their film knowledge. I alluded to loving martial arts films a bit earlier, so it's only natural to shout out 2 companies I came into contact with because of the love they've shown to Hong Kong action films. Vinegar Syndrome is a company I had no idea about until I saw their new Region A edition of Righting Wrongs was about to come out around my birthday. It's a film I discovered because of the clips of the amazing fight scene between Cynthia Rothrock and Karen Shepard. I had owned it already, but it was through a very bare-bones Hong Kong copy that had typos in its subtitles and no special features at all. When I got my hands on the new version, I was still damn happy. It's got 3 different cuts, 2 commentary tracks, and a bunch of interviews with folks who had a hand in production. Nothing makes me happier than seeing films that not a lot of people know about get so much love. Vinegar Syndrome does the same for all sorts of films, even further under the radar than what Arrow and Shout distribute. They've got a lot of super out there B movies and the like, which haven't had proper home media releases since VHS. Another cool distributor I gotta show some love to is 88 Films. They've brought a lot of martial arts cinema to the US lately, including the awesome box set of In the Line of Duty 1 through 4. Originally, I just wanted anyone, to release Yes Madam over here, as it's one of Michelle Yeoh's first major starring roles. It has some incredible action sequences in it, especially in the end. But the other movies in that set ended up being such a great treat alongside it. They've been on a hot streak of even more martial arts goodness, such as Police Story 3 and Magnificent Warriors. Of course, with me being a big animation fan, it's what I went to college for after all. There's plenty of it throughout my collection. Even before my collecting habits ballooned to where they are now, I've always loved picking up animated shows and movies. As I got older and learned more about the medium, I started to branch out into what's out there beyond what America has to offer. One of my favorite distributors when it comes to this has to be G-Kids. You probably already know them for being the current distributor of the majority of the Studio Ghibli library, but they've been around for a while, bringing animation from all over the world to American theaters and home video. If there's a non-US film nominated for the Best Animated Feature Academy Award, there's a good chance they're the ones who brought it over stateside. Save for an exception or two, I've never been disappointed at jumping the gun and buying a release from theirs without watching first. It feels like every few weeks there's been an awesome announcement from them, ranging from their 4K restorations of Ghost in the Shell 2 and Angel's Egg, to rescuing animated shows such as Dan Da Dan and Arcane from Netflix jail. They have some really nice special features from time to time too, such as being able to watch an entire movie in storyboard form. More recently, they've done a lot more special editions that I love, like their 4Ks of Bell and Evangelion Thrice Upon a Time. My favorite of them all being the Ultimate Collector's Edition of Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is the biggest set in my collection. This behemoth is heavy enough for me to bludgeon someone with, and I don't regret it one bit. If I had to recommend any of their films from their catalog, it had to be any of Masaaki Yuasa's films. He's probably my favorite animation director currently living, so I think any of his work is worth it. But if I had to choose one, it'd be Mind Game, both because it's not currently streaming anywhere, and it's one of the most unique animated films I've ever watched. Also, if anyone from G-Kids is watching, please bring back your unboxing videos. I miss them a lot. Another cool boutique company to look out for when it comes to animation is Discotek Media. I first came into contact with them due to the enduring love they show for Lupin the Third. Almost every film, television series, special, and OVA for the franchise has been released by them, and I own every single Blu-ray for it that they produce. It's admirable how dedicated they are to making older, more obscure anime accessible in the best quality possible, and often with a lot more going on than typical anime releases that just come with a textless opening and nothing else. Many of the releases I own tend to have liner notes that add some historical context and point out Easter eggs, commentaries, and all sorts of cool supplements. I recommend their live streams because the folks behind the scenes show some of the painstaking work that goes into some of their releases. There was one for Ninja Robots where they had to do a big search for English dub audio, asking fans to submit VHS recordings because the masters were long gone. They also do some cool comparisons of how remastered video looks compared to the original. One last cool thing is that they'll do discs with standard def video on Blu-ray instead of just a DVD if it's something that can't be properly remastered. That way, they can fit more material on less discs and play video at a better bitrate, which does look better than DVD. Most companies would just call it a quits or stop at the bare minimum, so I wholeheartedly recommend giving them a look. All of that's just scratching the surface though. There's a lot of companies outside the major studios doing great work for home video, especially if you want to expand things past the US. Exciting things are happening in the industry, and a lot of it is with these companies who exist outside of big studios. So with that long-winded info dump session out of the way, why did I bother going on about this in the first place? Well, I think the main reason I decided I'm making this little video is simply because it's something I've grown so passionate about that not a lot of people know is still an option. I'm tired of all the doom posting on the subject from people who haven't touched a disc in years. It's important to get the word out on this now while we still have options to hold media we hold dear in our hands. I love having cool stuff on my shelf, but also it ensures these works of art can continue to be enjoyed without being subject to the whims of money-hungry corporations that don't give a shit about preservation. In the words of Guillermo del Toro, if you own a great 4K HD, Blu-ray, DVD, etc. of a film or films you love, you are the custodian of those films for generations to come. Who knows what could end up almost becoming lost media if not for someone having a copy they can rip. An all-digital future, in my eyes, just has so much more drawbacks than benefits. Sure, streaming is convenient and how so much media is accessible on one device, but, ironically, it started to become an inaccessible medium for art, and often actively hostile towards its preservation and exhibition. I'd rather just buy something I like and actually own it, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That and having something be able to be accessible at the library for those who can't always afford streaming or good internet is also great. The more ways the work is available, the better. Plus, I just don't like whenever this conversation arises nowadays that people seem to act like physical media is just irrelevant or doesn't exist anymore. Almost every time I see a post about a modern DVD or Blu-ray, or how much streaming sucks now, or how we should just go back to physical media, I see it followed by at least one response of, oh, people still buy DVDs, they still make DVDs, or we should have never let physical media die. It's understandable given the dip in popularity of said formats, but just because you stop paying attention to something doesn't mean it stops existing. While it's nowhere near as big as in the 2000s, it is far from gone. Most movies released in theaters nowadays still get put onto Blu-ray and or DVD. Alongside that, there's a lot of older media that continues to get restored and given a chance to be appreciated even more. We don't have everything on disc, but there's still enough out there worth appreciating. Just this past year alone, we've had thousands of new discs, whether it be stuff new to physical media or reissues. There's never been a better time to be a collector, especially if you already have an interest in film or want to expand on it. It may seem like we're slowly marching towards an all digital future. Recent films such as Barbarian and All of Us Strangers play in theaters, get on streaming, and get no disc available after. Notes. All of Us Strangers is now getting a Blu-ray from Criterion, so in the time that's taken for me to finally record this, that happened. So kind of proves my point that should never say never. Anyway, Disney ended up discontinuing physical media production in Australia altogether. I grew up with some of my favorite movies being ones that I discovered due to getting a DVD as a kid, or renting from, funnily enough, Netflix. It sucks to see that option being taken away slowly over time, but if the title of this video wasn't obvious enough, physical media is far from dead. Despite all the doom and gloom surrounding the subject, we still have instances that send a message that enough people care about physical media for companies to notice. When Oppenheimer debuted on 4K last year, it was sold out just about everywhere, in-store and online. That's pretty unheard of, especially considering how niche 4K is as a format compared to Blu-ray and DVD. When a strong home video release is made, people will show up for it. There's still a persistent community out there that cares about owning their favorite media and discovering new favorites. There's plenty of great places to shop online and thankfully still some in person. It makes me happy to see more people every other day start to get into curating their own personal collection that means something to them, and I hope this video makes more people interested in doing so themselves. Either that, or supporting local institutions like the library that allow us to effectively rent physical media still despite Blockbuster and Family Video going under. Instead of giving in to some self-fulfilling prophecy about discs becoming completely outdated, how about we appreciate the opportunity to own art we resonate with? If it's something you personally can afford and there's a movie or show you care about so much that you get excited whenever it's added to a streaming service, just get that copy of it. Right now, media ownership is something we really shouldn't be taking for granted. Physical media never left, so let's stop acting like it did. Yeah. I thank you for getting to the end of this video. I know it is a longer one. It's actually the longest video I've ever made for like anything. But it has been like several years in the making because I started this script back in like 2021 and I was just too busy with college and whatnot to really fully commit to it, but I think also just struggling with my own sort of identity as an artist throughout like art school, obviously, but then I think, after that was done, struggling after that to like really commit to making something and feeling like something that I make would be worth watching or seeing or whatever. So I kind of, I'm very glad to have done this video because it is, again, long time in the making, but I've had a lot of encouragement to keep on finishing it, because a lot of people in my life do know it's something I'm passionate about. But, here's this thumbnail for the video that you're watching right behind it. Because I think with the making of this video, it's been very much like a returning to form of sorts, like both as an artist / editor / whatever. My first time editing in DaVinci Resolve, which is a free program I'm using because I don't have Adobe with my college anymore. I don't want to pay for that because they're a terrible company. But that's the point. I and I'm very happy with this because again, kind of started out as like, okay, I want to make a quick little guide thing, and I think it kind of really like jumped off when for one of my lettering classes, I made like a little poster infographic thing saying like, oh yeah, here's how you can get into collecting and whatnot, and then had a lot of people asking questions or like coming up after like, oh, like I had no idea about that, and it's just like, oh, it's crazy. That is actually kind of like informed people. So yeah, I hope you have gotten something out of this video, or even if you just haven't, maybe if you just don't end up collecting at all or anything after this, is like, still get to reminisce about something that is, it's just very cool being able to own something you really love and care about, and kind of share it with people, or just have it to yourself in such a way that's like very personal, I guess. It's weird to say, but it does feel kind of personal being able to just just put a disc into a player and just watch it, compared to streaming, where I feel like it's a very impersonal process. And like, I think there's a lot that can be said about streaming, but I in a way I think it kind of has devalued the like film as a like piece of art. It's in some ways, but that's could be a whole other video in itself. But besides the point, I'm again hope you got something out of this. I definitely did, being able to make this, and yeah, I don't know where things will go from here. I might make more videos. It's kind of the plan. Hopefully, I'd like to have something that's stable outside of my day job, but I'm not making stuff with the idea of, oh, we're gonna get out of the hood with this one or whatever. I don't know, like, but it just I'm hoping that by making something that satisfies me, it satisfies other people. And yeah, I guess I'll try to do more stuff, but I probably will update this channel and have it in the description and whatnot, ways to keep up with what I'm doing. Have, stuff besides videos I want to do, like art and whatnot, of course. But, yeah, like I said, it's kind of a turn to form for me. So I hope this is the start of something, whether that's like something that could be a stable source of income, or just, I don't know, just something that can kind of help others, in some kind of way. I don't know how, but something that could be a positive thing in this world, with just how everything is. It's always been kind of crazy, but I think especially now, I think it's something that's valuable. So I'll kind of stop rambling now, but again, thank you for watching this far, assuming you didn't just get to the end or whatever. But thank you so much.